The rainforest is a truly wondrous place, filled with many plants and animals that exist nowhere else on Earth. Today we're going to be seeing several of those animals that live in the rainforest. And after you see them, you're going to be doing some paintings and drawings. Perhaps by becoming acquainted with them, you will want to save both the animals and their environment. How sad it would be if this Earth existed without these beautiful rainforests. Here we see some pictures of the toucan. The toucan hops through branches high in the rainforest trees. It has a huge, brightly colored bill, which is not as heavy as it looks. The outside of the bill is made of keratin, just like your fingernails. The toucan's bill is serrated or notched to help it bite off chunks of the fruit which it likes to eat. Toucans do not build nests, but they live in the holes of the tree trunks. Most toucans have a patch of white or yellow feathers on their throats and chests, while the main part of their bodies are coated with black feathers. You can see when they fly a flash of red underneath. Those are called vent feathers. The toucan is truly one of the most spectacular looking birds in the rainforest. This morning we're going to be doing a picture of the toucan. We're going to be using oil pastels, and in order to use oil pastels there are certain things that you need. Obviously, first of all, you need the oil pastels, and there are several different brands on the market, and they're all equally good. You may want to, in fact you probably should, break the oil pastels in half before you begin, and you'll want to take the paper off the oil pastel so that you can use not only the point of it, but the side of it as well. So I'm just taking the paper off here, and now this piece of white is all ready to go, and I have other pieces that have been peeled as well. Oil pastels are a little bit greasy, so you may want to have ready a piece of tissue upon which you can wipe your fingers. That'll keep your picture clean and your fingers clean. And once in a while you can flick your paper like this when you get too much oil pastel buildup. You'll also want a colored piece, not a white piece, but a colored piece of construction paper, and it could be black, that shows up very well, or blue or purple, some dark piece of construction paper. When we begin to draw, we're going to be drawing with the white oil pastel, and that's because it gives us a good outline. And we're also then going to be using all different colors of the oil pastel. You might want to keep your tissue in one hand and your oil pastel in another. We're going to draw the toucan's bill like this. Here's a spot where the toucan's bill meets the body or the head, and the toucan's bill is very, very large, so we're going to come over on a curve like this, almost to the edge of the paper, and then we're going to turn it under like this. And the toucan's bill is serrated where it meets the bottom of the bill, and that's for easy gripping and cracking of the nuts and the fruits and so forth. And then the other part of the bill comes along like this. It might be just a little bit more curved, and that's basically the toucan's bill. There is also, on many toucans, they have what looks like a large black teardrop or a large black water drop there, and it's not, it's just large and dark, and then it has a little black right there. We're almost ready to begin on the blending of the bill, but let's just sketch in part of the head over here, and let's do an eye the size of a dime, and then another part of the eye which is on the outer part, much more colorful. And the toucan usually has some very colorful feathers right around the eye. Now the chest of the toucan comes out a little bit like this, almost looks like he has a bib right there. Notice I've reserved some paper because we might want to put a toucan's bill coming in like this. Now the toucan itself is not showing, just his bill, and we can draw the bill just like this. We assume that his head is out here someplace, and we might want to do another toucan's bill sort of facing up. Toucans are such sociable birds that you'll see them in groups. And since the bill is the part that we're concentrating on today, we're just going to draw several of them in the picture. If you want to put in more, that's fine. We're just going to go with 3 for now. The nice thing about oil pastels is, let's say that you want this bigger, you can come in like this. That line's going to disappear when we begin to blend. Well, speaking of blending, I'm going to take several pieces of chalk in my hand, several yellows, and even going up to the orange, and then to a bright red orange. And I think I'm going to put in this green as well. And that's enough for one hand to hold, I think. But you'll see that we'll need all those colors in order to do even one bill, maybe even more. So first of all, with oil pastels, you want to take white, and at this point you can even use the point of the white or the side, if you press hard enough, so that you can put an undercoating of white in. An undercoating of white makes your colors luminous or bright, and you get a brilliance with this undercoating of white that you wouldn't get otherwise. Don't worry if you cover up the lines, they can come back in. It's one of the reasons that I like using oil pastels, is they're so forgiving. You can cover things up and reshade and redo so that you can concentrate on shading your picture. I'm using a very light yellow now and pressing quite hard with the side. You can go ahead and redo anytime you wish. It's one of the good points, many good points of using oil pastels. All right, there's the basic layer, white and then light yellow. Let's progress to another yellow. And again, I'm sort of pressing harder on one edge than the other, but I want to get this really bright looking. And so I'm covering it with the edge. Occasionally I'll go back with my finger and I can start smoothing at this point, but you don't have to do a lot of it at that point. Now, the next color that I'm going to use is sort of a bright, bright orange. And the bright orange is along the edge of the bill more than on the center of it. We want some of that yellow to show. And there's another orange that we can use. Actually, it's more like a red, but it's a red orange, and it gives, this time you want to press very, very hard. And let's start putting in that red orange. Now, did you notice that that broke? That's okay. We want to work with different sizes and not let the breakage bother us. But something that's probably going to bother you is this buildup of oil pastel. So I'm just going to flick it like that, not rub it, but flick it. And I've gotten rid of those little pieces. All right, now the toucan's bill is so bright that at this point you want to press very, very hard. Let's take one finger and begin to blend the oil pastel. And there, it looks rather good. Now I'm going to take one more red at this point, and this is the deepest red that I have. Notice that we still want the oranges and the yellows to show, right? And we come in here with a point and press very hard, but we want some of this nice bright red to show up in the picture as well. This toucan that we're doing right now has had about 4 different colors. They're all related, however. Notice that they're all the hot colors. Now take your finger like this and begin to blend a little bit. Now it may worry you that we've covered up that line of the beak. Don't worry about that. We'll bring it back later. Now you know what? Many toucans also have a bright yellow-green on their beak. Even though most of this beak is made up of the hot colors, you often see toucans with this bright, bright yellow-green. So I'm pressing hard with the point. Not only yellow-green, but sort of a turquoise or a light blue. So I'm going to bring in some of that as well. Doesn't that look pretty? This is the great thing about this picture. It's so much fun to do. You can use practically every bright color in your box and still come out with a toucan's beak that looks like it just came from the rainforest. Beautiful. Now you can come in and rub a little bit if you'd like to. Some people don't. There are many different ways to use pastels. Some people rub a lot. And to make that beak look even brighter, I'm coming back with white. And look what I'm doing. I'm putting, the toucan's beak is so shiny that by putting white back on top of this, we now have sort of a highlight in the toucan's bill. That bill is practically finished. Now, the next thing we want to do is to take some black, and we don't put white under this. I'm going to come in and put some black right here. And I'm going to put some black right here on this part of the bill. Sometimes this is a very narrow line of black, sometimes it's very big. And I'm going to put some black right in the middle of the eye. Now at this point we might say we have a dead toucan, because all living animals have a little bit of white reflected light in their eyes. So I'm taking a point and pressing quite hard. Yeah, now he looks alive. The feathers around the black part of the eye will be sort of two colors of blue, which I'll show you in just a moment. Let's put the white underneath, and then you'll need a light blue and a medium blue. All right, that light blue almost looks like turquoise, but it actually, when you put it on paper with white underneath, it comes out to be a very bright light blue. Let's wipe that off. Let's take this very bright blue right here, and let's put this over the edge and some lines in it. And basically you've got the toucan's eye. Well, the toucan's chest feathers are white, and to put those in, you can put them in with the side, or you can put them in with the point of your oil pastel. Looks almost like he has a bib on. And these feathers up here may be almost any color. They could be that bright green, they could be bright blue. Chest feathers can also be yellow. Just to make it interesting, let's do that. Let's put some yellow over the white here, because sometimes the chest feathers are pure white with a little tinge of something in them, or sometimes they're bright yellow. And let's see, around the eye you could even come back in with this bright green for the feathers around the eye. I see that a little bit of mine has smeared, and I like that because these feathers, oddly enough, are not just pure color. Sometimes a little yellow or a little other color comes in. Do you see what's happened here? I don't worry about that either, because look what we're going to do when we finish. We're going to take, and we're almost finished now with this one beak. We're going to take the black and put it around like that. Let's come up with the black feathers here. You can color up that line. Now the black feathers don't show up much on the paper. I'm going to put in some blue. Oddly enough, some blue with black sometimes makes black look even blacker, or it gives it a shine and a life to it that's very attractive. I'm going to outline these feathers. That'll help our picture a little bit. Very nice. And then coming down here and making this look feathery. All right, and our bill's almost finished. I'm going to outline right here and outline right here. And then remember that serrated edge that looks almost like the bill is stitched together? You can come back with your black when you're finishing and put in that serrated edge. And there you have a toucan. Now we're going to go on and do at least one more bill, but it's done in basically the same way. Let's take white and put an undercoating of white so that you get luminosity. Notice I've left this off this bill. Not all toucan's bills have that. And there is usually a stripe here. That's rather a large one. Some toucans have a rather thin black stripe right there. Now let's take a different shade of color to begin with. Let's put this in bright green first of all, an undercoating of bright green. let's take the light blue and put over that. Look what a nice color you're getting. By blending with your oil pastels, you can get the most beautiful colors imaginable. And that's the fun part of it. I think we need another blue there. Let's come in now and do the edges with this sort of, there's a piece of paper, we just get rid of it. Bright, bright blue. Pressing hard on the edges. And you know what? There's probably even another blue in your box. And I think this is sort of like a blue-green. We can come in with some of this also. And if that needs lightening up, let's come in with a yellow-orange to add a little bit of that to this bill. Now you notice the contrast. This bill is basically made up of bright, hot colors, and we've added little greens and blues to it. This one is made up basically of cool colors and needs a little brightening. So we'll take a red-orange, and perhaps there's a little bit of red-orange in parts of this bill. Doesn't that look pretty? That gives you a contrast that warms it up and makes it nice and bright. Don't forget to use your tissue every so often to wipe your hand, and also to keep flicking so you get all those little pieces off. Now that really, we've used about 5 or 6 colors there, and again when you finish it up, you come over across here and you outline your bill so that it'll show up nicely, and then you go ahead and put in your serrated edge so that toucan can have fun with the nuts and the fruit that it eats, and so that it can also grab easily. I'm not going to put in the eye right here because we wouldn't quite see it, but we've concentrated on the bill. In this next bill, let's use some different colors. Let's come in with what underneath first? That's right, let's put some white in. And we're going to then put, let's put some pink in. Oh, that looks good. Bright, bright pink. Pressing very, very hard. Now you know when you do this, you look like you're being a little bit sloppy because you're working quickly and you're smearing it in, but that's okay. You're not really being sloppy. You're just being creative and you're having fun with it. And oil pastels lean toward having fun. You know, they're really good about that. They're so forgiving because you can cover it up if you don't like what you've done. Well, just for fun, let's put in something like purple and blend that in. Now you've got 3 bills here and they're all slightly different, and I'm going to take another color purple, which is a little more bluish, and let's go back with our pink in the center and highlight it. Let's take some white to highlight this bill. You know what, I'm going back here too. Don't let that bother you that I hop around. Artists do that all the time. They see a part that they think 10 minutes later that they need to put something in, they just go back and do it. It doesn't bother them to work on each part of it because each part of your picture relates to each other. Okay? So there is another set of colors that you've used for the bill. Let's take the black to outline it. And let's put in the serrations. It looks sort of like stitchery. And that bill is finished. Now, you notice that I haven't put eyes or heads on all of these. I do want to get some sort of rainforest background here. So I'm going to take the side of my chalk or my oil pastel, and I'm going to put in some bright, bright, bright green, just suggesting the green of the rainforest. Since this rainforest is so dark, I'm letting some of the black show through. That's good. You want your paper to be part of your picture. And I'm coming in when I need to and using the point. And when I want to go fast, I use the side. Notice how flattened that piece has gotten. That's why you have to get the paper off first. because you want to use the point and the side. All right. Now, your picture will not look exactly like this. That's good, because every person is an individual, and you don't want all your pictures to look the same. I'm going back for just a minute, and I'm going to show some other rainforest pictures that students have done. Look at that. Now that's very different from mine. The student has put in the eyes as well and more background. That's great. This one looks entirely different. Look how huge those bills are and the variety of colors. And some of the eyes are showing, and some of the rainforest is. This person actually has put in 4 bills. He could have even put in 5 if he'd wanted, and they're all different from mine, and they're all beautiful in their own way. So now it's time for you to go ahead and outline your bird, and then use your colors to blend with. And remember, it's your picture, so you want all of your rainforest toucans bills to look just the way you want them to do. So use the colors that you think are the most beautiful. This is a small green iguana from the rainforest. He's actually about 6 months old, and so he hasn't even come close to getting to the size that he's going to be. Mature iguanas sometimes are 6 feet long from nose to the tip of their tail, and they're quite large when they're older. Now he's got the bright green coloration of a young iguana. As he gets older, he may look a little bit more mud colored. But you notice that his bright green coloration would fit in very nicely with the rainforest. His tail is very, very long, and it'll get longer still as he grows. Notice that his tail is much longer than his body, has some brown stripes on it. This young iguana does not have the spines on his back yet that he's going to be having, or sort of a frilled set of spines. You notice that he just whipped his tail around. And of course, when they get big, they really use their tail as a weapon or a protective device. They don't bite, of course. Notice that the iguana is beginning to have sort of a frilled neck piece down underneath his head, and that he's not totally green. He has some turquoise blue spots that are growing on his scales here. His eyes are sort of amber with a black dot in the center, and he will be having spines on his back as he grows older. As he grows older, you might see some stripes coming up from his stomach. And of course, his tail is green and brown as well. The iguana has very sharp claws with which to cling to branches, vines, or twigs. The iguana is basically a vegetarian, eating leaves, fruits, and berries. Fortunately, it's not on the endangered species list. In fact, the natives of the rainforest area are being encouraged to raise iguanas to ensure the survival of this species. This lesson is going to be about the green iguana of the rainforest, and before we begin, I'd like to show you the materials that you'll need for this. We're going to be doing the iguana in watercolors, so we're going to have a box of watercolors, and again, notice that this probably looks pretty much like your box at home or at the school. It looks a little bit dirty, but I don't mind working with boxes like that. They're very realistic, and actually I pick up some great colors from the top when I use that kind of box. We're also going to be using a cup of water. One that's about this size is nice because it doesn't tip easily, and you can use a short-handled bristle brush if you wish, or you could use a black-handled or a brown-handled watercolor brush where the bristles look a little bit different from that. Besides that, you'll need a piece of paper towel so that you can mop up any drips or spills, and that should just be kept handy right near you. I'm going to put the watercolors over here where they're easy for me to get, and before we actually begin, I'm going to show you some student examples of a finished lesson of the iguanas. Here's one where the students have, this student has painted the iguanas quite large, and has them clinging to tree trunks as they would in the actual rainforest. And in the background you see some words that relate to the rainforest. Here's another version where the color is a little bit more, well, not thick necessarily, but a little more brilliant than the one before. And you'll see that the size varies, the way the iguanas look vary, the printing is different in each case, and that has to do because each one of us is different in our approach to art. Now that you've seen some student examples, let's begin on drawing the iguana. The iguana is really quite easy to draw. I'm going to draw with a black felt pen, while you may want to sketch with pencil, or you may want to sketch with a black crayon perhaps, or even a black felt pen. If you use a felt pen, you want to use a permanent one, but black crayon is just as good. I'm going to start here at the nose, and the iguana is quite bumpy. Sometimes you'll even see one of the other eyes showing on the other end, but here comes a nice easy line. His back slants down, 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 and the tail sort of whips around like this. After you get that part done, you can come back, put an eye in right about here, and the mouth sort of looks a little bit grumpy in that it turns down on most iguanas. It's got a very blunt nose, and you know, at this point he looks almost like a dinosaur, doesn't he, in some cases. He has a sort of a flap of skin that comes down under his chin like this, and we're going to go over there just to establish where his chest would come in. Now you can go a lot slower than I'm going, and I'm going to put in a few spots that the iguana has here, and we're going to put in a few frills. Yeah, his shoulder is rounded like this, and his leg comes back and then maybe forward depending on where he is, and then you have the abdomen or the stomach, and you have a leg back here that looks a little bit like this. Remember I said they look a little bit like frog's legs at this point, and of course they have very, very long nails with which to grip the log. Let's get that log in there. Might be clinging to a very large rainforest branch, and we can get the rest of the log here. But before we finish the log, let's bring his other leg back, and let's put in those long gripping toes with very long nails with which he can cling to anything. And perhaps his tail comes back like this, gets thinner as we go along, and it might possibly just whip round so that you can see part of it like this, and it might have some stripes. Okay, that's pretty much your basic iguana, and you're going to make the branch perhaps coming around like this that he's clinging to. Now I see that I've left out part of his tail here. We can put that in. It's going to have a few stripes. Some iguanas, when they get older, have some stripes coming up from their abdomen like this. Now if you wish to put in another iguana, you could. You could put one perhaps above him, and maybe it's a smaller one, I don't know, maybe it's larger. But you again come around with a curve, and he's got a very long tail. It's sort of a blunt, almost triangular head, and here's the frill coming down like this. The eye. Got his head a little bit skinny there, but you can take care of that in your drawing. And then he has an arm perhaps, or a leg that comes forward like this, and has some toes that are gripping. Now you notice that I'm not drawing terribly exactly. What I'm trying to do is get the impression of the iguana. Oh, and guess what? I forgot. The iguana, when it's mature or older, has a series of spines or scales going down its back like this. Starting somewhere where the head ends, you can begin to put in these series of scales. Now you notice that one of my iguanas sort of goes off the page. That's all right. That looks very artistic. Very often artists deliberately go off the page, and here are his toenails clinging again. And And there you've got your iguana. Now we can put some bark in here, and perhaps his branch goes in that direction. And that's pretty much it as far as drawing the iguana. Let's put some lines in the bark of the tree there. Now when we begin to paint, we're going to be using yellow-green, because basically the iguana is a yellow-green color. So I'm going to mix some yellow that already has some green in it. And notice how I'm pushing my brush around, yellow to green to yellow. And that's very, very bright. And I can just begin to wash over my whole iguana by doing this. Now notice that you've got different shades of green coming in here. If I put more yellow in, it becomes a very yellow green. But the minute I put just plain green in there, it doesn't look very iguana-ish. So I mix the yellow and the green together. Very often, and notice I'm not having to do this terribly carefully, because we can go back when it's dry, and any lines that you lose while you're painting, you can wait till this dries and come in and put those lines back in again. Actually, if you go too slowly when you paint, people have a tendency to go over and over and over the same spot. See what I'm doing now? You don't want to do that. You want to keep moving. Push your paint and just keep moving. When we get up here to his head, he has a little bit of blue mixed in, sort of like a turquoise blue, maybe a little bit lighter than that. And this blue is very, very attractive, and you can, as the artist, they bleed some of that blue into the picture, and it doesn't have to take over. Will you notice also that if I get a spot on my paper, if it really bothers me, I can come in with a paper towel and just blot it up carefully. But I don't mind spots. Certainly in the rainforest you wouldn't have a perfectly smooth type of surface, and you'd have all sorts of shadings and splotches. And I'm going on his back here. I can even add a little bit of orange to this yellow. Maybe this iguana is getting a little bit older, and as they get older, their colors change a little bit. Notice how I'm pushing it into his back as well as here in the front. So yellow, orange, and green make good iguana colors. For his eye, I'm going to take that orange plus yellow. I'm going to dot it in here. You can go back later if you wish. I'm going to take some brown right now along with that orange and put some brown stripes on his tail, and some brown stripes coming up here from his abdomen. Well, I've got that brown in my brush along with the orange. Why don't I just go up here? Colors straight out of the box are boring, so you don't want to just take the brown and go, well, that's the color of the tree. It's not really. You'd have some orange in the tree. You'd have some blue. Look what happens when you get blue and brown mixed together. Be brave and try some orange and brown mixed together. Try some blue in the shadow. See what happens right away? Looks much more like bark. Now you notice I've stayed away from the black in my box. Black can really kill your picture. Besides which, if you use blue plus, look what happens here. If I use blue plus brown, I get a very dark gray, almost a black. So as I do this log, I'm working very quickly and just going right in there, smearing the color in and trying to make it look like bark by not going over it and making it look like wallpaper or something too terribly smooth. The bark would change as it goes from part to part of the log. Now, let's say that you happen to come in here and cover up one of your toenails. Remember, when this dries, you'll be going back and putting in the lines that I've already put in there. Let's do one more iguana. I'm starting with yellow and yellow-green and mixing them together and moving right along on the picture and changing a little bit as I go from part to part. I can add some orange to that and get a very good iguana color. Colors right out of the box, like that, are not too interesting. And you add some yellow to that, a little bit of orange, and that looks much more like a real iguana. Now, yeah, and I've added some orange there, especially where I go over his stripes. And let me show you what I can do. If I figure that's too orangey, I can mop my brush out. I can go like this, and I can move that paint around. Clear water, just like I've got now, and almost dry brush can take out colors. Let's put some more back in. Let's take some blue and put in here. All right, almost finished with this iguana. We're going to put in some, ooh, that green's too dark. What am I going to do? I'm going to wipe my brush off. Now I've got clear water in there. Push the paint around, and I can change that. And I can bleed in some more yellow and a tiny bit more orange if I wish. And look how colorful, and yet how well that iguana is going to blend into the rainforest. Now, what colors did we use for the eye? I think we used orange, a little yellow, just dotted in. We'll come back with a black crayon or something later. Let's mix up some orange and yellow and brown for the bark. That's not brown right out of the box. It's orange and yellow and brown. What do we add to that? Let's add some blue. Ah, I like that. Look at that. Doesn't that make it look like bark right away? And it gives you a very, what we call a painterly effect when you use the orange, the brown, and then you come in with some blue. Looks very nice, very painterly, and smear it in. It's going to look much more artistic than if you just paint it in too carefully. Now, I'm not advocating that you're really going to be wild with your paint. You're not, but you're going to push and pull with your brush. Push and pull and mix right on the paper. You don't even have to mix in your box. And the colors for the bark, again, are yellow, orange, brown. That gives you the lighter ones. And then, if you want some dark, you bring in the blue. Now that, your picture is basically finished at that point. If you want to, well, I think I will make that log a little bit bigger, okay? Let's do that. And orange. I'm going to make that a little bit larger so you can cling to it better. Brown. And blue. And you have a very nice picture of iguanas right there. Very loose and very watercolor looking. Now, I had to draw with a black felt pen, but what you want to do when this is dry, and by dry I mean at least a day later, come back with your black crayon and draw in all those lines that you did with pencil and outline it in black like this. Don't forget to add some of those other lines, and you get a very nice picture. Some people may want to make this really look like you're studying the rainforest, or if you really want to remember what the rainforest is all about, you can just brainstorm words, and you can put in words like hot, because when I was in the rainforest it was very hot. And you might put in words like humid, which means that it's moist or damp. Now look what happens here. I can only get in part of that word, but I'm not going to worry about it. That makes it look quite artistic, and you know what? Your eye is going to probably fill in the word humid. Maybe you want to put in the word ants. Maybe the word iguanas. Iguanas. Well, I made a little mistake there. I'm going to change it and put the line right here. And then you can just keep on brainstorming words to put in the back, and that adds to your picture too and makes it look very artistic. Now that we're at the end of our lesson, I'd like to show you again some student work and show you how it is different from mine and how each student has done the lesson a little bit differently, different words. Some iguanas are large, some are small. And it doesn't have to look perfect. Some have more detail and some have less. Here we're looking at the tamandua, a nocturnal animal which lives in the rainforest. Let's look at its snout, in which it has a long, sticky tongue. With its tongue, the tamandua can catch up to as many as 500 ants or termites in one lick. The tamandua also has a prehensile tail with which it clings to the branches of the trees of the understory of the rainforest. Notice the sharp, curved claws with which the tamandua breaks open termite nests or pries bark to find ants and termites. The coat of the tamandua is long and silky, usually a tan color with a brownish-black mottling. The tamandua therefore blends in well with the light and shade of the rainforest. Now we're going to work on the tamandua. I'm going to show you first, before anything else, the materials that we're going to use for this lesson. We're going to be using watercolors, and besides watercolors, we're going to be using some white tempera paint and a brush that looks sort of like this. It's called a bristle brush or an easel brush. We're not going to be using very much water. You can have this just about that much ready if you need to. And besides the tempera paint and the watercolor paint and the brush, you're going to need some paper towels. So the tempera adds a little thickness to the watercolors and makes it sort of bright and vibrant. Let me show you some student work that has been done with this technique. This again is tempera and watercolor combined with a black crayon or a black felt pen outlining when it's totally dry, like the next day or the day after. Here is another student version, and notice that each child or each student has approached this in a slightly different manner so that they don't look all the same, and each technique is different and charming in its own right. Everybody's different, so their pictures are all going to be different. Well, let's begin on the tamandua. I've sketched out a tamandua, but I'm going to sketch it for you with black felt pen so that you can see the outlines much better. Let's begin with the nose, which is long and skinny, and then let's make this curved, long curved back, and then here is its prehensile or clinging tail, and we're going to wrap that around, it's going to come around the back of the tree, and we're going to wrap it around like this because prehensile means clinging. Here's the branch that it's clinging to. And it's a very strong tail. If you had to, you could hold the anteater up by its tail or the tamandua. You wouldn't want to do that, however. Let's make its long, skinny nose for poking into termite nests and ant nests. All right. It has rather small eyes and ears that might look like this. And then it has this long, sticky tongue that retracts when it has ants on it right back into its mouth, and it just swallows the ants and then sticks its tongue out into the nest again. Let's make its foot here clinging to a branch, and it has tamandua has long claws so that it can scratch into the termite nest or into the ant's nest. You can draw like this for the shoulder and the arm. Maybe coming along here, hanging onto the log. And we basically have the anteater finished, except that we're going to do a curve here and a curve there, and then curve forward for the foot with those long claws. Now it clings to the logs with these claws, but it also scratches open termite nests and ant nests. Let's show the log that it's clinging to. And maybe we have another branch of this tree up here, or another tree behind it perhaps. branching out. Now, on this branch, or any branches, we might be showing some plants that look sort of like this that grow in the rainforest, and they grow on logs. We'll be perhaps doing an art lesson some other time. We'll just add that to give some atmosphere to this. And here is sort of a lumpy, bumpy nest that is clinging to the log too. And there you have your anteater. Oh, you know what? The anteater is sort of two-toned. It looks like he's got sort of a sweater vest on. So the darker part I'm just drawing in sketchily right now. The hair might be longer on the anteater. And he has sort of a sketchy sort of mask in many cases. Now, we're going to start with our watercolor. And again, the box is a little bit dirty. That's okay, because I may just pick up some of those nice colors from up there. I'm going to dip into the white, and my brush is quite dry. I have my paper towel ready. And now I'm going to dip into yellow and to orange. And I can even mix right on the edge of my cup or mix up here if I need to. And I think that that's sort of a creamy color. Yes, it is. Notice that it's streaky, and streaky means that it's going to look even more like the actual animal. You know what's nice about adding tempera to your watercolor is I got that a little too dark, so I'm just bringing in some white and some yellow and sort of patting it like this, and that gives us a feeling of shading. And you can cover anything up with the watercolor and its white additive of the tempera, and it's sort of creamy colored, maybe a little bit more white and yellow. So basically I'm using white with a little yellow, little orange in it. Everybody's color will turn out differently. I've never had the same color twice on my tomanduas when I've done these. So if it looks a little bit different from this, it's okay. But I'm trying to get that sort of creamy color. The tamandua, living in the rainforest, might possibly have something growing in or on its coat as well, though it moves faster than the sloth. Not much faster, but somewhat faster than the sloth. And is in the canopy and the understory also of the rainforest, right up there in the trees. It rarely comes down to the ground. It's more awkward on the ground, though it might come down occasionally. Let's move on to its prehensile tail, which simply is a big word meaning a clinging tail. Monkeys have prehensile tails, and some types of lizards have prehensile tails. That's basically the tamandua's color. And you notice I haven't done the nails. Now I'm going to use a little blue, a little brown, a little blue, a little brown, a little black, still with white, and we're going to come in here and do the hairy, darker part of the tamandua, blue, brown, and black, with leftover color in your brush. Gives you pretty much, yeah, that's nice, the color. And notice how I'm using my brush. That's important. And I use the back and the front, blue, brown, and black, to make this look not too solid, but rather hairy. There's his little sort of vis-like color that he has here. The nice thing about using what might be called a dirty brush in this case is you've got some leftover creamy color, and that makes this look more real, I guess you could say. It makes it look more attractive and certainly much more artistic than if you just used black right out of your box. It would look pretty awkward and not as attractive. All right, I'm going up again with around the face, and notice I'm ignoring the eye there. We can go back later with a crayon when this is dry. There's a little bit of color like that around the ears, maybe right here. And that's basically the tamandua. Now at this point I am washing my brush out a tiny bit but I'm also drying it on the paper towel, going back and forth, and going back to the orange and a tiny bit of red, not much, to get sort of an orangey, reddish, pinkish tongue color. Might be have a little more red than that, not too much. And your tamandua is finished. Now let's talk about the bark that he's clinging to. I'm going to use blue plus brown and come in like this, and a little orange, and working very, very quickly so that it doesn't look too awkward. I'm using blue and brown and a little orange. Some white is left over. Good. And using the white to spread with, and we're going to get the bark of that tree. You may want to work a little bit slower than I am, but that's okay. We can make it look very authentic with this blue and brown. Now notice I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because the rainforest is so thick with undergrowth that I want to put some green in here as well. Blue, brown, and I've still got some white. Trying to make that look rough bark. See how I make it look rough? Just by using my brush in sort of a dabby, smeary fashion. You're going to get bark. If you want it darker, say there might be, well, there wouldn't be a shadow, I don't think, in the rainforest. Not enough light comes through to give you very sharp shadows. And there he is scratching away at a nest. You get sort of an oil painterly effect when you do this. Now I'm coming out using the edge of my brush with the blue and the brown to make sort of gray to do the nails of the tamandua, which can dig open those nests very easily. All right, practically finished. We have a little bit more bark here. Let's make it a little darker looking, adding some blue. Blue, brown, and orange basically have been our colors for the bark. Now, let's wash our brush out at this point, and we never squeeze it with our fingers. That's not good. I'm washing the brush out, and I'm patting it on the paper towel. Going back into the box with some yellow, and then from yellow to green, we're going to put in some rainforest background. That was a little too light, so let's add some blue to our mixture, which gives us a little shading. The rainforest really is quite dark, you know. Not much light gets through. So by adding blue to the green, we get a very dark background. You notice that it makes the tamandua stand out against the background very nicely. Now we're just continuing to paint fairly carefully around the tamandua. And we don't want to make every single leaf of the rainforest. We want to get an impression of what the rainforest looks like. Continue until you get to your flower. You didn't have to draw a flower. You can just dip into the red with some white and get a nice bright pink, and put perhaps some orchids or any type of rainforest flower in the background. Something bright and beautiful. Continue with your blues and greens and yellows, and you'll have the impression of the rainforest background. Keep on going in between the paws and behind the body, and we're almost finished. The tamandua, you remember, climbs on trees in the understory of the rainforest, so there would be lots of vines like lianas and many, many leaves and foliage behind him. It should be quite dark. Adding lots of blue. It's hard for light to come through that canopy and the emergent layer of the upper story of the rainforest. Many of these animals are nocturnal, and nocturnal means they come out at night. So we're seeing the tamandua in a very dark setting of the rainforest. And blue and green will give you a very, very good impression of the dark rainforest background. Now we're almost finished. And we're getting a nice mixture of push your brush, streak it around, and try not to stay in one spot too long. All right. A little yellow added to your green. And we're just about finished with our picture of the tamandua. Tomorrow you go back when it's dry and outline the tamandua with a black crayon or a black felt pen. Now that you've had the experience of seeing some of the plants and animals of the rainforest, think about ways in which you can help save this wonderful environment that is beneficial to our whole Earth, not just to the segments of the world where the rainforests exist.